Beautiful Tuesday morning in the city of Lagos. Good morning and welcome to Today in the News here on Vanguard Life. My name is Ololade Adeomi. I look into our newspapers as usual, starting with Vanguard. Major headline on Vanguard says year-end festivities push inflation to 4-month high. Month on month, food inflation rises to 1.13% in November. Headline inflation climbs to 1.22%. Year on year, headline inflation continues decline to 14.45%. Tinubu's reforms helped Nigeria beat 2025 inflation target, says presidency. Story can be found on page 19. Top banner: terrorism sponsor ex-governor Bafarawa carpet Bello Toji. You can find the story on page 9. Interagency rivalry to blame for bandit allegations, Kwara government official says. The Art USA exhibition, Christmas comes early at Alexis Galleries. Senate kicks against multiple budgets in one fiscal year. Lower banner: it says reps are weighed into Dangote NMDPRA dispute. Summon parties. Emergency rule. President can suspend elected officials, says Supreme Court. Away from Vanguard, a look into the Punch newspaper. Major headline on the Punch says petrol battlefield. Dangote importers locked in brutal price war. Dangote sparks 102 billion naira monthly loss for importers as refinery enforces 699 naira per litre petrol. Marketers fume, depot reviews prices. In Gige, EFCC clash over missing passport in London. Buhari believed Asorog gossip I planned killing him, says Aisha. Away from that, a look into the nation. Major headline on the nation says Buhari didn't name successor to save life. Keep APC intact. Ex-president's biography reveals why he didn't overrule Oshibajo. Top banner: viral bandit footage result of interagency tension. Pleased to resume enforcement of tinted glass permit January 2nd. Supreme Court: president has power on emergency order. He can suspend governor. Boost for disposable income as inflation drops to 14.45%. Lower banner last story says BUA's 30 billion naira cash award for long-standing staff members. Away from that, a look into the Guardian. Guardian says Supreme Court verdict on emergency rule unsettles polity, power structure. Senate flares multiple budget, raises FIRS 2026 target to 35 trillion naira. Tinubu lauds Buhari's legacy, virtues at biography launch. House summons Dangote, NMDPRA boss over renewed rift. Inflation outperforms Tinubu's target, eases to 14.45%. That's all we have on the front page of the newspapers this morning. Join us after the break for a quick analysis of some of our top stories. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Today in the News here on Vanguard Live. My name is Ololade Adeomi. Joining me in the studio today for a quick analysis of some of our top stories is Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He's the publisher Ikeja GRE today, Ilupeja today, and Lekki today. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Lolade. Good morning to all our viewers. Good morning, Nigeria.
It's a pleasure having you in our studios today.
Thank you.
I look into our major story for today. The petrol battlefield. Dangote importers locked in brutal price war. House of Rep wades into dispute. Nigeria's downstream oil sector is in a fierce price competition. The competition is between Dangote Petroleum Refinery and the independent petrol importers and marketers. The conflict actually centers on petrol pricing and market dominance. Dangote has publicly attacked the regulator, the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority (NMDPRA), accusing it of issuing import licenses that undermine local refining investment. The House of Representatives, as well, has also waded into this dispute. To what extent would you say Dangote's pricing strategy is actually aimed at, genuine market competition versus, dominating the downstream sector?
As long as Nigerians are paying less for fuel at the pump, I would say that the strategy is good. I mean, some people will say that if it's short term, just to capture the market, and then when it becomes a monopoly, we now all pay for it. Well, let that time come first. What matters most is that competition is driving the price down. As of last weekend, when he had a press conference, he says he's reducing the price to 699 per liter at the gantry, which will translate to 740 at the pump. He says that's a Christmas bonus or Christmas promo for Nigerians. We welcome that. Look, you can only become a monopoly if government is in cahoots with whoever the dominant operator is. As long as competition is thriving, I don't see why people are afraid of what this man wants to do. Most important thing is that he has made petrol available. He has made it available at a less price than what it was before his refinery came on board, and he has assured that there's supply. Fuel queues, I think of the past. When was the last time you saw a fuel queue or fuel shortage? And ever since he came on, prices have been dropping precipitously. By the time his refinery came on board, we were paying over 1,000 a liter. As of today, I believe we're down to 740. And that's because he has the power to reduce prices according to what his own operational overhead is. Even if he has monopolistic tendencies, he can be checkmated. He can. Because part of the problem that he's complaining about now is that the government is issuing import licenses at a time when local refining capability exists. I remember in the beginning, when he first started, the idea was he will have to ramp up production slowly to be able to get to a point where he can satisfy Nigeria's domestic consumption. So the big question is, has he reached the point where he can meet up to our consumption? Yeah. He says, well, you have to consider all the other modular refineries as well, the smaller ones and the quantities they are supplying into the market, and then investors who also want to start other refineries. That is discouraging for them to see that government is issuing licenses willy-nilly for people to import. And also, a big issue seemed to be that the imported fuel at some point was going to be costing less than his own. If you remember when they wanted to tack on a 15% tax, the idea was they said it was to help local production before they shelved that idea. So he's saying you can't be importing if we can meet domestic demand locally from local production, and that issuing all these licenses is discouraging. Because they've invested so much money, there are new people who want to come into the market, but then they see that imports can come and run them out of business. It is said that the quality of imports is not as high as what Dangote is producing. Naturally, you would expect that since they're not paying transportation, local production should be cheaper. And I guess that's what he's trying to show us, is that he has the ability to make it cheaper as long as we produce an enabling environment that's encouraging to them. So he's shown us by this that, look, he has the power and he's done it. He's reduced the price to 740. Usually it's market forces that determine price. But when you have a behemoth that's that big, that has the power to shift prices unilaterally, he's done that. So I think that there's merit to what he's saying as long as they can meet domestic consumption. That's still the big million-naira question. Can he and the other modular refineries, as we speak today, meet local consumption? Nobody knows. Up to tomorrow, it's still opaque about what the exact number of liters we consume per day in Nigeria is. I know the number dropped after they removed subsidy, because subsidy was a scam that inflated the numbers of our consumption. But up to today, I don't think we have an exact figure of what it is we actually consume. But once we know that, we cannot determine how much Dangote and the modular refineries are able to supply and what the shortfall is or the excess. If there's excess, we have more to import. If there's shortage, then how about we have more to export? Sorry. If there's shortage, then how about the refineries that are upcoming and the ones that have been given licenses to produce, will they be able to meet that shortfall? If so, then in the short term, maybe you can give a few import licenses to meet up to the shortfall, but not just issue licenses willy-nilly to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, which was what Dangote is complaining about. And I don't blame him for being bitter. The man borrowed $30 billion and is accruing interest every single day, and you're frustrating his ability to pay that money back. It's not funny. It's not funny at all.
Back to the $1 million question. In your opinion, how feasible do you think this is for Dangote's refinery and the local plants to actually local refineries as well to actually meet Nigeria's petroleum needs?
I think it's possible. It's very possible. First of all, remember that he's got a 650,000 liter per day refinery that can produce that much. And he has said he's also expanding it to 1 point something million in the next couple of years. By the time you add that and you add what the modular refineries are producing, come on, petrol is not like oxygen that we breathe in. We have a finite number of cars we can count, finite number of trucks, finite number of generators we can count. So we know how much the consumption is. And if electricity supply, for example, is getting better, it's reducing how much generators we use petrol. But the more we also improve public transportation, trains, the more we improve public transportation, trains, ferries, things like that, the less we are dependent on our cars, the less petrol we consume. So I believe that it's within his capability, and the modular refineries and all the new licenses that are being issued for new construction, that we should be able to meet local demand. I don't see why not. His refinery is the largest single train in the whole world. It is quite capable of churning out quite a bit of what we need, and whatever is short, I'm sure the local smaller ones can catch up with that as well.
So Aliko Dangote has alleged, NMDPRA of sabotage, and just issuing license to foreign refineries as well, foreign import license rather. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you support these allegations? Have there been any facts concerning these allegations?
Well, one thing I know is that when two elephants fight, it's the grass that gets hurt. These are two major people. The regulator, that's the government, that's the person who is controlling your industry. That regulator is your Oga, more or less. And for you to stand up to him and say, what you are doing is unfair, it means your back has really been pushed to the wall, because that person has the power to make or break you. He can withdraw your license, he can do all kinds of things. So for Dangote to be speaking up, it really means he feels victimized, right? Because the regulator is somebody you seek to appease, not somebody you want to antagonize. So for him to be speaking up, it must be in a bad situation. And he came out swinging. He accused the head of that regulatory body of living above his means. What he was implying is that there's corruption going on at that agency, and it is that corruption that is fueling this allocation of import licenses. That under normal circumstances, if things were operating normally, those licenses would not be issued, or not as many would be issued, because there's local capacity. So what is essentially saying is that the oil and gas mafia, they are settling the head of that regulatory agency, which is enabling him to live above his means. How much does the head of the regulatory agency, the highest paid civil servant in Nigeria, how much does he make? Is it possible that with the salary of any government employee, they can afford to send 4 children to school in Switzerland that, quote unquote, for 6 years is running about $5 million? Where do you get that kind of money from as a civil servant? Well, we've not heard a response from the guy. Maybe he came from wealth. Maybe he inherited wealth from his family. Maybe his wife runs a successful business on the side. We don't know. But if it's strictly based on his salary, then clearly there is some illicit funds flowing through the system. And it's not easy to believe. I mean, it's not difficult to believe that because of the position he holds, which is so critical in terms of issuing import licenses Look, if you get an import license to bring in just one load of refined petroleum, your next several generations will never starve. Just one shipload of refined fuel into the country, you are made for life. So you can imagine how keen the contest to win these licenses must be, because there's a lot of money involved in it. So people will go to any lengths. I mean, people bribe for much less reward. There's corruption for much less gain than what stands to be gained by getting an import license. So that's a very sensitive position. So if somebody now feels like they're being victimized in a way that is detrimental to their own profitability and their bottom line, and they cast it around the fact that it's affecting everyday Nigerians, because as long as import licenses are being issued when we have local capacity, number one, it's reducing the ability to employ people, because they're exporting the jobs to the people that we are importing from. Those countries that we are importing from, they are employing people for their refineries. Those people they are employing for their refineries, they can pay their children's school fees, they can put food on the table, they can do all kinds of things. Then secondly, I don't understand the oil market, because to my way of thinking, as long as you are bringing the thing from another country, you are paying transport, you are paying demurrage, you are paying all kinds of stuff that should make the imported one cost more than the local one, refined one. But it seems like the locally refined one at some point was costing more than the imported one, which is why Dangote was being accused of wanting to do a monopoly. But now, these factors are forcing him himself to review his pricing. That's why I say for him to even become a monopolist is difficult, because there's free market, there's competition. The other day we saw some heavyweights, I think Akim Bello Osage, I think Mr. Ogulesi from the UK, that was once one of the investors in Gatwick Airport, and some heavyweights all came together and said they too are about to start a refinery.
Yeah.
And those guys have the kind of money that they too will build a major, not a modular, they will build a major refinery. So competition will always guard against a monopoly. If you've gone and spent 20 billion with the view that you'll be the only one supplying the market, you'll be shocked, because somebody will come up tomorrow who will compete with you and will force you to reduce your price. So if you've made assumptions at home, you can lock in your price at X number of naira that you'll be able to pay your loan back, you'll be shocked, because competition will come that will force you to lower that price. So I think to some extent, the allegations have some legs, both with the fact that there's corruption in the oil and gas sector, yes, and some of the evidence, which the regulator has not refuted yet. He has not come out to say Dangote is lying against me, or he has not come out to give reasons of whether it is true that he's funding his children in this school and where he got the money from. There could be very legitimate places he could have got the money from. Also, alternatively, it might be inaccurate to say that that's the kind of money he's spending. It might be false. It might just be a wrong report. So he needs to speak up and defend his integrity, so that Nigerians have peace of mind that we're not getting scammed and we're not getting pressured or cheated or being forced into situations that are not the best for our bottom line at the end of the day.
The House of Rep has, decided to intervene. How effective would we say that the legislative intervention is in issues like this, especially the fact that the oil and gas sector is a critical one?
Well, the legislature has limited capacities to intervene in administrative matters. A lot of it belongs to the executive. The legislature generally passes laws and has an oversight function. But even within that oversight function, their powers are limited, because remember, even the laws that they pass, who enforces them? The National Assembly does not have its own police, doesn't have its own army. The Supreme Court doesn't have its own army. So you pass laws. It's just respect for the Constitution and, respect for the country's flag that makes people uphold the laws passed by the National Assembly. But at the same time, the National Assembly does not have to wade into every single administrative matter. Once they pass a law like the PIA, Petroleum Industry Act, that's their job. They've done it. They've passed a law that creates an enabling environment for the oil and gas sector to thrive. They've done their work. Any other thing they need to do, any other oversight work they need to do is to make sure that the tenets of the PIA are being adhered to strictly. Any other intervention is for the executive. That's what we have regulators for, And if Dangote or any of the operators feel like the regulator is oppressing them or being unfair to them, that's what we have the courts for. It's the courts you approach, not the legislature. It's the courts that are there to mediate in disputes. So what Dangote should do, if he feels he's being unjustly treated, is sue this NMDPRA. Take them to court, and fight it out there and let the court be the one to hear the evidence and make a determination as to who is right, who is wrong, and what the real solution is. So, oversight is what the National Assembly should do. That is the extent of its intervention. Oversight to make sure that the law it passed is being adhered to. Finish.
So people of the school of thought that there should be reforms, to help balance the interest of both the domestic refineries, the importers, and the regulators in general. What kind of reforms do you think are necessary to help balance this?
I'm not an oil and gas industry expert, but I thought that the PIA addressed all. How long ago? How old is the PIA? It's just passed like in Buhari's term, and that was supposed to address all the ills in the sector. It had so many sections there that claimed to cure all the problems. So I don't know what reform we need again at this stage, because it was under that PIA that enabled even Dangote to build his refinery. So I assume that PIA had already taken into consideration all of the shortcomings, all of the lapses, all of the fail points. But as with most things in life, it's when you actually start doing it that you start seeing loopholes. And so the PIA can be revisited from time to time to amend it, to let it address new issues that were not contemplated when they were drafting the PIA. It's quite possible that in the evolution of local refining, new issues are cropping up that were not anticipated when the PIA was drafted. So periodically, yes, it should be reviewed and tweaked to address new issues. But as a non-oil and gas expert, I can't really say I can recommend specific reforms that would resolve this issue, beyond the fact that, look, and this is broad-based, not limited alone to the oil and gas industry, but as Nigerians are in our country, we should encourage entrepreneurship. We should encourage local capacity in everything. Things, for example, like I like what the governor of Anambra State did, Charles Soludo, when he first came into office. He said he would only buy locally produced vehicles for his use and for the use of everybody in his cabinet. Mm-hmm. He's not buying imported foreign vehicles. Yeah. Those are examples of things we can do to empower our own people and our economy. So if we are producing vehicles locally, why would we buy imported ones? If we are producing fuel locally, why would we buy imported fuel? The reason, of course, is the localized production creates jobs, strengthens our economy, puts money in people's pockets, helps our GDP. There are so many things to be said of it, that if there's any reform whatsoever that's due in the oil and gas sector, it is to encourage greater local production. As far as I can see, that is the solution to every problem. How they will go about doing that, especially with this issue of they are issuing import licenses willy-nilly when there's local capacity. How do you stop that? Is it by an act of parliament? Is it by executive order? Is it by public outcry? Is it by media scrutiny? I don't know, but there's a solution somewhere out there.
So look into a second story quickly. The Nigerian Supreme Court has ruled that the president has constitutional authority to declare a state of emergency in any state to prevent a breakdown of law and order, and that under such an emergency, the president may temporarily suspend elected officials in that state. The decision came in a split 6-1 judgment, with the majority affirming that Section 305 of the Constitution gives the president power to take extraordinary measures to restore normalcy, and that the Constitution does not specify limits on what these measures can include. The court also dismissed a suit filed by 11 PDP-led states which had challenged the emergency rule and suspensions as unconstitutional. What are your thoughts on all of this? Let's start with that.
Fortunately, the Constitution is a living, breathing document, and the Constitution has never claimed to be 100% correct on everything. And the Constitution also does not legislate on everything. The Constitution is a broad-based document. When it was written, it didn't anticipate any and every single problem that we encounter on a daily basis. So, Constitution is subject to regular amendment. Well, maybe not so regular, but to amendment. Constitution is also subject to interpretation because it does not spell out every single act of human behavior and motivation. So there's an agency called the Supreme Court that is supposed to read into the spirit of the Constitution, because the letter of the Constitution is very limited in what it says. This Section 305 that they're talking about, they say it doesn't specify the extent of state of emergency, blah, 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 blah. So it's up to 7 men and women to determine in their head, since it is not specified. Look, a law is not what the Constitution says. A law is what the Supreme Court says is in the law. Because the Constitution does not spell everything out in detail. So it's for the Supreme Court to use its own value system and to use what they call precedents, to look at some of the previous legal decisions into this thing that's not said, it's not spelled out specifically in the Constitution. This issue that they decided yesterday, a lot of people have kicked against it. And look, the Supreme Court is not infallible. They are human beings just like you and me. So they can make mistakes as well. The fact that 6 of them said it should be this way and 1 said it shouldn't be that way, that doesn't mean the 6 are correct and the 1 is wrong. Doesn't mean that at all. So that's why many people say Supreme Court judgments should never be final. That sometimes they should be subject to review by the National Assembly, which is the spokespeople of the people. Because when they make a mistake, it can have really deleterious impact on the lives of people. For example, look at what happened here yesterday. What they've essentially said is that the president can reverse the mandate of the people. Yet, I'm of the opinion that the mandate of the people is supreme, even more supreme than the Supreme Court. Because this is government of the people, by the people, for the people. We are the power. If you now abdicate that power to 7 people, so 7 people are deciding what 220 million people should and should not do. I think that is a miscarriage of justice. I think it's a travesty, some kind of way. And I don't say that the president should not have powers to declare state of emergency. They say breakdown of law and order. Look, these are all discretionary. Look at Rivers State, for example, when it happened. The president said, based on what was happening at that time, he foresaw a breakdown of law and order. So law and order are now actually broken down. He took the step to prevent it from happening. A different president might have looked at it and said, well, let me deploy police, let me deploy army, let me try 1 or 2 other things, rather than just remove the elected governor and suspend the House of Assembly, which is the will of the people. I think the will of the people is too important to be trivialized or trampled upon, on a whim or caprice. So I really worry that what this decision has done is it has given not just the current president, but future presidents the power to be able to subvert the will of the people. Suppose we get the kind of a president in the future. I'm not saying the one we have now is, but suppose we get the kind of a president in the future who wants to use this to persecute political opponents. He has the power to say, oh, there is some crisis going on somewhere, which he could foment the crisis himself. There's about to be a breakdown of law and order. I remove the elected official and suspend the House of Assembly. Suppose he does it at a time when election is coming and puts in his hand-picked administrator to be in charge of the state at the time when an election is coming. So it's a very, very risky thing that has been done by the Supreme Court. And thank God it's not finite. It's not final because the National Assembly has the power to amend the Constitution. Although it's very difficult to amend because after the National Assembly passes it, it has to go around the 36 states and then to those of the Houses of Assembly of those 36 states. But if even our state assembly people, if they are thinking this through properly, if an amendment comes in front of them that says that the will of the people must always prevail, I don't think they will have difficulty amending the Constitution to limit the powers of the president to willy-nilly remove or reverse the will of the people, as the Supreme Court has given him power to do. Basically, they've created a fertile ground for autocracy or authoritarianism because now the president can wake up one morning and say, oh, maybe simply because there's a political disagreement in a state between people in his own party and the opposition, right? I mean, is there any state at any time that has total peace? There's always one disagreement or another. There's always one strife or another all across the country. So on the basis of a pretext of a problem, the president can wake up one day and recalibrate the political equation in any state. I think that's too much power in the hands of one man. And I also think it diminishes the power of the people. And I think National Assembly should revisit that constitutional provision and rewrite it in a way that makes it tighter. See, it's not the Supreme Court's fault. It's our fault. Because if we leave the interpretation of our will to 7 people, they will according to their own principles. Remember, as I said, they are human beings. They too have biases. Let's not kid ourselves. They have biases. Even if they don't have biases, their interpretation of the law is subject to their own worldview and their own intellect and their own mentality. Remember, the law is an ass. Pick 2 lawyers, give them a legal issue. They can both argue intelligently for and against. And both of them will have legal grounds to support their argument. So the law is that. So the 7 people should not be the final arbiter of 220 million Nigerians in terms of what we can and cannot do. I don't agree, right? But that's our fault if we let our constitution be so loosely configured that any and every little behavior needs to go to 7 people to decide what we can and what we cannot do. Granted, the Constitution cannot capture every single aspect of human behavior, but maybe what we need to do is subject Supreme Court judgments to legislative review after it has come out or something. There's got to be a better solution than to let 7 people dictate or determine the fate of 220 million other people.
Okay, based on what you just said, a president has been set for future presidents as well. How can Nigeria then ensure that emergency powers are actually used genuinely for security threats and not political ends?
Well, having a vibrant opposition is one thing. That's a way. The second is having a vibrant media as well. Remember, media is 4th estate of the realm. When media cries out, when media does its job, it has the clout and the ability to make certain decisions be either held in check or be reversed. So those are the 2 most direct ways: is to have a credible opposition that will always speak up and make noise when things are not being done properly, and then have a media as well that serves as a check and balance on the excesses of any administration. That is the key. Unfortunately, in this day and age, much of us in the media were poorly paid, poorly remunerated, under great pressure. It is very difficult to do our jobs above board because of the circumstances under which we operate. So media actually needs more support, maybe from government. We need more support from private foundations. We need more support to enable us to do our jobs without fear or favor, because there's also an intimidation factor that inhibits our ability to do our job. There's pressure from the powers that be. There's so many things that make it difficult for us to do our job properly. But if we are free to shine a light in the darkest corners of our country's administrative, legislative, and judicial dark areas, the country will be much better for it.
Our time is fast spent. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
My pleasure, Nigeria.
That was Mr. Dayo Akitobi. Is the publisher Iketo Jerry today, Like It Today, and Ilu Peju today. Do also follow us on all our social media platforms as seen on your screen. For up-to-date stories, check out our website at www.vanguardnigeria.com. Join us tomorrow for another fresh edition of Today in the News here on Vanguard Live. My name is Ololade Adewumi. Have a lovely day.